podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Dun, 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 dun. I don't know why I feel the need to like sing something different every single
But it
week.
often ends up being the dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
Dun. That's like our unofficial theme song.
That's
Dun,
right.
dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That just reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, you know, when
Yeah.
they're like
Yeah.
the bad guys. What are they called? The
yeah.
The
witches?
monkeys? Like the
Yeah,
flying
the-
monkeys?
And the guys who are like, oh, we.
Right. Yeah,
whoa.
yeah.
I don't know why that reminds
This is
me.
the
Yeah,
wrong movie, but
that's-
I'm thinking Oompa Loompas. I'm like, this is wrong.
That kind of
yeah.
meshes,
Also,
though.
similar kind of feel. I just think of
Definitely.
any time where you're like dun dun dun, you know, and the bad thing's about to happen. We're like dun 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 dun. So maybe it's apropos for a suffering podcast.
That's
you
right.
know?
I
That's
guess.
so
Dun, dun,
funny.
dun, dun.
I was writing something today and I used the word apropos, and I thought at the time, I was like, why would I use this word? It sounds that nobody uses the word apropos. So that's, you know, it's my God wink ahead of time. That
There you go.
The movement of the spirit.
right.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's just see
man.
how many times can we use the word apropos in this recording.
Mhm.
Just
We
joking.
should
Let's
sneak
not
it
do
in.
that.
I
That's
like
terrible.
that.
A friend of mine who was a priest, and we used to play a game. So I would like give him a ridiculous word to try and use during his homily at some point. And so he
That's
would
funny.
do his homily, you know? Yeah, during it was
That's
great.
so fun.
Mhm.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, I had like a little internal struggle about like, is
Is this-
sacrilegious or not? You know?
As long as you didn't sneak it into any of the prayers of the mass, I feel like you're okay.
That's right. Yeah. Say, what is it? Say the black, do the red. Say the red, do the black. I don't know.
know.
Whatever.
That's a
Liturgical.
thing I've never heard before.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
don't-
definitely a thing for like if you're looking at like the general instruction of the
Oh,
Roman
because
Missal,
of the way
you know,
that right.
So like the
Okay.
parts
I'm not
that
a
you
priest,
say.
so I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. We might get letters about that. Maybe.
Don't judge us.
Okay. By the way, hi, Rachel Wong.
Hello. Thank
How
you.
are you?
Hi. Nice to see you all.
It's
Oh,
nice
it's
to
so
see
good
you
to
too.
see
See you too. Yeah, it's so cool because I was a guest on the Feminine Genius podcast, which was so much fun. So I kind of met you through that, but then today is the first time that the other two ladies are getting to meet you,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Super awesome.
Mhm. We're very excited. That is for sure. And how is Vancouver right now? Are you in Vancouver proper, or where are you?
That is a very good question. So, officially, no, I'm not in Vancouver proper. So, depending on people's, knowledge or, their understanding of the Metro Vancouver area. So, technically, I am in Surrey, so about 35 minutes
nice.
east by driving.
Mhm.
Since I started doing a lot of interviews with American guests, I like to tell them that it's actually faster for me to get into Blaine, Washington than Vancouver, BC. So, should be a
Oh.
fact for you.
Okay.
But
Very fun.
as it is usually, it's pretty gray. We are kind of colloquially known as Raincouver, so it has been raining the past couple of days. It's kind of gray. I don't think it's raining right now, but it's still pretty gloomy and gray out there. So it's on par for
Yeah.
the rest of the year usually.
That's cool. So
Right.
fun fact, my dad was in the RCMP and he was stationed at the Surrey detachment.
Well, would you look at that? I used to
I
work
know.
there.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, what a small world. Okay, the
well.
only thing I remember about Surrey is going to a pig roast with my dad for work when I was really young, and there was legit a whole pig roasting on a spit, and I
That's
was
amazing.
like horrified. Like,
I bet as a kid, yeah, it's
Yeah.
probably like those like old timey. You think of the medieval kind of fair type things
Sure.
where it's just like
Yeah,
spinning
yeah.
over a fire.
yeah.
Those are really delicious. I just have to say.
Are they? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've been, me too. We might get
Okay.
letters about that.
I'm sorry. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm sorry.
That's I don't know. If I'm not a vegetarian after that, I don't think it's ever gonna happen, you know?
Yeah,
So
fair.
yeah.
Yeah.
so it's pretty
I've-
good.
That is great.
Yeah. I've never been to Vancouver. I would love, one day I will get there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
never been.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite here, though, where it's like super sunny.
Yeah, I'm
Absolutely,
just looking at where you are. It looks really bright.
Yeah. sun's like right in my eyes. But I love it. Not complaining.
Yeah. I was in BC once, but I was 7 years old. And my memory is because I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, so prairie girl, and I love big prairie skies and just like the wide open spaces. That's just what makes me happy. But I remember driving with my family on a road trip and driving, through Saskatchewan prairie, through Alberta, and it was pretty flat. And then all of a sudden coming up into the mountains, and I remember crying because they were so beautiful. And then I couldn't believe it. It blew my mind as a 7-year-old because I'd only ever seen, basically prairie.
That's awesome.
cool.
That's
I'll
so
have to go
it
back
really
someday.
is. Yeah, I love it because there's so we lived in BC when I was young in Richmond, BC, and then I also did a year of NET Canada, and I was in Victoria, BC for
Right.
the year, which was so awesome. I love it so much because you have these woods, like these massive forests with these huge old growth trees, and the mountains, which is they're so beautiful. Like just to see how I mean majestic they are, really. Like that sounds so cheesy, but it's so true. And then to have the ocean there too, it's like I don't know, for me it's like a
Everything.
trifecta of beauty that
It
Oh, that's what
really
they call it, beautiful BC, and everyone's like, yeah, it's just true. Like, sorry, it's just
That's
true.
right. That's right. That's right. I'm like, yeah, Ontario, yours to discover. We're not going to tell you anything about the province. Go figure it out yourself.
I love that so much. Aw.
Oh, so good.
I'm sorry, I just got distracted because I was looking at the window and there's this like we have a fake Christmas tree in front of the house with a little like crocheted angel top,
Oh.
and this blue jay just came and landed on the angel and was like inspecting it, being like, "What is this?" And then it just flew away, and it was just funny. I'm sorry, I just got distracted. Okay,
Nice. This is good.
yes, mountains are beautiful.
Mountains are beautiful. Yes. Okay. Another majestic nature thing. So my mom has started putting peanuts outside because there's this random squirrel that comes and takes the peanuts and then he'll like bury them on everybody else's lawns. So like the neighbors' lawns and whatever. And then my sister's cat, for some reason, her other two cats were ganging up on this one cat. So this cat came to live with us, which is so sad, But anyways, he loves seeing the squirrel and he'll sit there and look. And then recently, crows have started coming. So now there is a murder of crows that comes to sit on the thing. And the cat's so funny because the noises that she makes are like not normal. They're like,
Oh no.
Is she trying to crow?
I don't know what she's doing. It's only with the crow. Like she doesn't do that with the squirrel. But anyways, we were like
Special
watching Mass on television this morning, because Mass is canceled or whatever. We're nice homily, deep homily, and then the cat's like.
I'm gonna be honest with you. That story was like the most roundabout. I was like, you started off with like the majesty of nature, and then you went to squirrels and peanuts, and then it was like the cat, and you went to math. I was like, I have no idea where we're gonna end up. It was
Welcome to my brain. Welcome to my brain.
I love your brain.
Okay, before we get too off track,
Yeah.
we should introduce the theme for today. Okay, so we are super excited and happy that you could join us, Rachel, because today we're going to talk about suffering and mental health. So, because this is such a big topic, and for a lot of reasons, I think, because there's so many different aspects of mental health, because I think even men and women experience it differently or can experience it differently. We wanted to have a couple of episodes. So we're really excited to have you today for this episode. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is really, I mean, it's been so much fun already. And, it's going to be a wonderful topic to talk about. I'm happy that we're talking about it. So thank you.
Yes. Amen and amen. And so maybe with that, I can just actually turn it over to you and you can tell us a little bit kind of about yourself and about, this topic of like, what's your story with kind of mental illness and health and faith?
Sure. So okay. So hi everyone. I'm Rachel Wong. I know that it might be, for those who are listening, it might be interesting because there are two Rachels today. But like I guess we've mentioned already, I am here in Surrey, BC. I was born and raised, and I recently graduated from Simon Fraser University with a degree in communication and international studies. And I currently work for the university, and I also host the Feminine Genius podcast. So I've been doing that at the time of recording this for about a year and a half now. And it's been such a joy and a privilege to be able to, we were kind of chatting before we got started, and just to do journalism for the kingdom, I guess. So that's kind of the short end of like what I do currently. I think like faith and mental health wise, like I've been a cradle Catholic, and I still am Catholic, of course. And I would say that I came to my faith to really call it my own in 2016. And it's actually quite fitting that we're doing this recording on the 27th of December. Actually, I was really thinking about that today, just because, 4 years ago today, in 2016, I was about to go to Rise Up, which is Catholic Christian Outreach's annual conference. I was going to my first one that year, and it was in Vancouver, of all places. So God really, kind of set it up for me in that way. But that was actually the day that I, it was one of maybe a few times in my teenage life, but it was actually a day that I was seriously considering ending my own life. And by the grace of God, he really gave me the strength that I needed to go to that conference. And, I guess it's a weird way for me to enter into the story, but I just could not get over the fact that we're recording today. And I was thinking about that earlier. But I guess leading up to that, I'd had an interesting childhood. Like I would say that it wasn't anything different from other folks. Like I'm very privileged and lucky. Like I have two wonderful parents that are extremely loving, extremely caring. I'm the eldest of 3 girls, so I have 2 younger sisters. But I think early on, like I went through Catholic school, I went to mass, and we would hear every week or in religion class that God loves you, he has a plan for you. All these things that we kind of associate with God's love at a very early age. And it's these very positive narratives. But then as I grew up and I had some pretty traumatic events that had happened to me just over time, I began to kind of have maybe the curtain be pulled back a bit. And then things started to unravel for me in a sense that, okay, if God is real and he loves me and he has a plan for me, then why did, all of these happen? Like, why is he taking people away from me? Why is he pitting friends against me? Why are people that, maybe I don't necessarily like have a close relationship with, like, why are they all talking behind my back? So just different things that have happened over time. And I think as you get through high school, and I think no matter who you are, high school is a bit of a trying time regardless.
Totally.
So it was challenging, I think, to go in with already a pretty low self-esteem, low self-worth, and really trying to figure out where my identity was. And I tried to throw it behind like academics and just being the very best. And the Pokemon theme song is in my head now, but just being the very best at like everything and trying to be, just be good at and excellent at everything. And I think that that's well placed, but to a certain point, it can become an idol, and it's it's a very trying and difficult thing. And eventually I found myself really burning out, and like it was the middle of high school there where I think I had my first thoughts of suicide at that point. I already was diagnosed with generalized anxiety and depression and panic disorder. So the way that I describe that is that it's kind of like I walk around as a ticking time bomb, and I have no idea how and when symptoms will manifest. So that's kind of like the precursor that like all of this really comes to a head like in that time leading up to Rise Up in 2016. And like I said, by the grace of God, he really pulled me out of just a severe depression, a severe desire to live even. And I look back on it, I'm like, man, at 20 years old, like just thinking that you've kind of hit like a wall or a ceiling and that there's nothing else for you to do, or there's no more purpose for you to live, is such a difficult, and it's so, it's difficult for me to process that. Like, I'm thankful that I've been able to move past it. And really it is, by God's strength and his grace. Because like I mentioned, I was trying to throw my weight behind different things. I was trying to seek out my identity, and it was through Eucharistic adoration and then confession. It's always that 1-2 punch. But God,
Totally.
really brought me back. And, I remember just sitting in front of the monstrance and kind of, really having a heart to heart with God, with being like, why did you let like all of these things happen to me? And kind of realizing too that like it was through all of these things that I was able to maybe learn a little bit more about myself, even though I felt like things were being taken away. It's like this weird nebulous thing, but I felt like even though things are being taken away, God was showing me that no, like I'm helping you to grow and, become more of who you're meant to be, but also who I want you to be. And maybe I'll close with this, that like the theme for that year's Rise Up for anyone who was there was from Isaiah 43, verse 1, which is called by name. And I just could not believe it. Like when that kind of clicked in my head, I was like, wow, like God he really did that. Like he called me by name out of my own like deep depression, desolation, to go to this conference, to be among a sea of many people that I didn't know. I was so worried about how I would look just as a fake Catholic or a sad Catholic amidst like all of these what I thought were happy Catholics. And then coming to see that, oh, like I'd been putting up walls like this whole time and people are actually a lot more real than I thought that they were. So yeah, it was really beautiful just to be able to do that. And, I can't say that's been a perfect journey ever since, but it's one that I think, I constantly go back to and I constantly try and draw knowledge and learn from.
Yeah, for sure. I was at that Rise Up.
You
Did I
were.
ever tell you that? Yeah, because
No.
I was
Oh my
working
goodness.
in Winnipeg at the time and went with a few friends to Rise Up Vancouver. Ate a lot of sushi, which of course is really good. Yeah, but I totally remember that, the big conference room there and the theme. Wow, really beautiful. Yeah, I can't, that's so crazy that we were both there to see what the Lord does,
Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I was really struck, Rachel, by what you said just at the end there, that you felt like you were a sad Catholic and you were going to go be around a bunch of happy Catholics and that alienation that created. And I think this is something that we've talked about just when we're talking about this podcast, and how like that there's this sort of expectation amongst Catholics that we always like that to be happy Catholics or something. And it's like, okay, there's something that's beautiful in that and good of like wanting to have the joy of the Lord, but also that is not the same as if someone is struggling with depression, or if somebody is struggling with anxiety or any of these things, or just going through a rough time, that we all have times of hopelessness and we all have times of despair. And then some people also have these additional like, actual illnesses where that's that can prevent you from feeling those feelings of joy or whatever, and that can be really alienating. And so I wonder if you just want to say more about that in terms, of just that, because I think that's a place where the devil can get in with lies too, right? Of like, well, you're supposed to be like this and you're not, so something's wrong with you, right? And I think that can be really, it's kind of dangerous. So anyways, I want to say more about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, it's funny because I think like that, I've spoken about, my own testimony and journey with mental health and in the faith context at length for quite a number of years now. And that's always been the phrase that has kind of resonated with me, just because I think, like I mentioned earlier, we were raised with this narrative of, God will make everything, kind of great and right as long as we abide in his love, which is true, and we follow the 10 commandments, which is also true. But like you said, Nicole, like there are so many times where things kind of happen that are outside of our control. And of course, like, mental health is a very real thing. Mental illness is also a very real thing, in the same way that people suffer when they have physical illnesses as well. So I think that the very first time I kind of encountered this idea was literally, I think, my second day of university. I kind of made this vow to myself when I left high school. I went to Catholic elementary and high school, and I made this vow that I was going to actually cut myself off from my faith. And I like to joke that, I thought I could run, but God runs even faster. So literally, it was the second day I show up at SFU, and I was face to face with 2 Catholic clubs on the main mezzanine there of the Surrey campus, and I could not believe it. But also the other thing I was struck by was just the fact that everyone was so joyful. And I couldn't put my finger on why. I was like, why are they so joyful and Catholic when my entire, maybe not my entire, but like majority of my experience as a Catholic up until that point had been, riddled with suffering, feeling like I wasn't Catholic enough or good enough, or that because I had sinned X number of times or I did these things that I would never be able to be redeemed. So I think that there's that aspect of it, thinking that, you will never be enough, or that the way to earn God's love, and even that word, right, earn, like to earn God's love or to be in his favor means that you have to be right or do the right things all the time. So there's that. And I think the other thing that, just as you were kind of expanding on that point, Nicole, like the first thing that came to mind was I remember having a conversation with a friend about this. And, I think this was maybe shortly after my conversion, and just feeling really overwhelmed at like, okay, like how do I navigate these experiences that I've had that are still a very big part of me, like this mental illness, mental health is still a very big part of me. It's something that I'm very passionate about, but how do I reconcile that with my Catholic faith? And I remember sharing this with a friend at the time about how, at one point I had considered, ending my own life. I had depression, and I don't want to say that this was out of ignorance on her part, or, that she wanted to hurt me, but she said, like, how can this be? Like, you just need to trust in God more, so that these things don't happen. And I remember feeling so sick at that point, just because I was like, oh, so it kind of like brings me back to that first point that I mentioned, where it's like, oh, did I do something wrong? And certainly, like when I was going through all of this, like I think that the words in the creed had always stuck in my head, where it's like, we believe in life from conception to its natural end. And, even though there was a part of me that at the time I wanted to separate myself from the Catholic faith, I knew that, through and through, I'm pro-life, abortion, like I can't support abortion. I can't support euthanasia. But then when it came to like my personal experiences and thoughts of, oh shoot, like, does that instantly like send me to hell? And I don't know what the theological thing is around that. Maybe I really should look into it. So I appreciate this opportunity to kind of remind myself to do that. But to come back to that conversation, I was just like, oh no, like, does this kind of bring me back to square one? Like, have all the graces that I had, really grown in from the Lord since that experience of conversion up until now, have I lost all of that just because now I've kind of brought this into the light, that this was something that was part of my life? And, here is a friend that is kind of speaking this into existence. Like, you just need to trust more. And I think it maybe, and this might be something that we talk about, but really it's that addressing of, the mental and the fact that we are, spiritual beings just as much as we are physical beings.
Yes.
And that in itself is not a correlation to how much you trust / love / honor God, right? Like he has provided this opportunity for us to like grow, and he doesn't want us to live a horrible life. He wants us to live to the full and to be our fullest and truest selves, but that will, allow for some suffering, and there will be some joy, but that doesn't mean that it's a horrible life. I know it's kind of like this cyclical thing, but and it's something that I think we spend the rest of our lives trying to understand. But
totally.
Totally. Even when you're talking, like I can remember having conversations with students, or there was one person I was talking to who had gone to kind of I don't want to call them a medical professional because they weren't like a doctor or anything like that, but I think they were involved in some kind of like paramedical profession. And this person was like Catholic and had this business that's focused on, faith and health and things like that, and told this person that depression doesn't exist, that it's not, and those kind of things sometimes are so ingrained in us, or we could hear things that are just plain wrong in the realm of faith and mental health, and even when you talk about like doing the right thing, or that if you love God enough, or if you trust him enough or whatever, and then these things will go away. That's the prosperity gospel. That's not, and that's been roundly condemned, because it's not like our relationship with the Lord is not that, right? Like, and I'm like pointing the finger squarely at myself, because even last week I had a conversation with like these ladies and our other secret prayer buddy, and it was like exactly that. Like, they were reminding me in that all the places that I'm comparing myself to other people are not like, that my worth or the Lord's love for me or my goodness doesn't actually come from my doing or like my, so it's like another aspect of that, but
it's true. And I think, we've talked about this too. And like, if I had a friend who was, let's say, going through cancer or something, or whatever, I can't imagine anyone, well, maybe perhaps this could happen, but you wouldn't go up to someone who has cancer and say, if you just trusted God more, you wouldn't have cancer.
Yeah.
So why do we think that there's that it's okay with mental illness? And maybe it's just because we can't see it in the same way. And yet now we can. I mean, now we know that there's biochemical imbalances that can cause illness in our brains. And that's something that there's medication for and there's treatment for. But I think that we're still, I think in wider society, but certainly within Christian circles, finding that hard to grapple with sometimes. And so that, these things can be said, right? But it's like, it's just good to say it. Like, that's not true. That is not what we believe as Catholics. Like you said, like there are things that are physical issues. And yeah, there can be connections to, psychological things or whatever. But there are things that are where we need to go to a doctor. And I was just talking with somebody today about this and remembering a time that I had just like some minor medical thing that was going on for a long time. And I'd kind of been to the doctor, but it didn't help, and it was still there. And I'd been praying about this for years. Lord, please take this thing away. Lord, please help me with this. And finally, one day, I felt drawn to just randomly open scripture. So I kind of randomly opened my Bible, and it was this verse in Proverbs that's like, God has given the doctor skills to help the human person. And so if you are sick, you should go to the doctor. And I remember reading that and being like, right, and I think that's what we believe as Catholics too. Like, this is part of that's in scripture. Like, that's right from scripture, is like, if we're sick, we have to go to the doctor. And that's the same for mental health too, right? It's like, I just like, just want to say that. Like,
I mean, there's another thought that came to me, Nicole, when you were saying this, was like, yeah, okay, sin is the root cause of everything, right? Like the original sin, like at the beginning, it was not, so these were not things that we had to deal with. So in some sense, if you want to say like these things exist because of deep spiritual realities, like there is truth to that, but then, but that's just always been the case since the fall.
For everything.
Exactly. And so then all illness, physical illness, everything, death itself, right? Like it all kind of comes back to that. So yeah, but we can have both, and we can use the gifts of intelligence and the resources that God has given us in the medical profession, all these things, and still believe that there are definitely spiritual causes for everything that we sort of encounter and experience. The other thing that I thought was like this idea of trusting God, that like it doesn't mean that we don't trust God just because we experience, like, trusting God doesn't mean that, well, I trust him and now I
all my
feel
problems
great
will go away or something,
and everything's great. Yeah, exactly. Like trusting him actually exactly means that when I don't feel great, when everything sucks,
when I don't see,
and I'm faced with natural and supernatural challenges, spiritual, physical, mental, all of it, that I choose to reach out to the Lord in some way, like whatever way that might be. Like it might be by just deciding to talk to a friend. Like maybe we can't even pray. Even not being able to pray does not mean that we're not trusting God. And I think that's a very limited understanding of God's connection with us and his mercy and his love for us, that we'd have to have these prescriptive, and I, Rachel, to sort of say like the 1-2 punch of like adoration and confession, like that is the thing, like grace sacraments and the grace of the sacraments are real. And so I'm not trying to discount like the wisdom of the church and giving us ways back into relationship with God, but that just our personal subjective experience of that is so varied and so complex, and that God is a part of all of that. Like and so I think that's so really important too.
Yeah. Maybe I can ask you this too, Rachel, because it seems to me like there's kind of a double cross in some senses, not double cross like murder
Like an
mystery
NCG
double
mystery
cross.
story, yeah.
That's right. But like two crosses.
Mhm.
Like the one cross of the suffering that is mental illness, anxiety, depression, like that actual cross, but then also the other cross of people not understanding that, or people, or it being hidden somehow, or, it's not a broken leg. It's not, or people saying like, oh, but don't, like that kind of pain of people not understanding. Like, what's that kind of been like for you? And how do you like navigate that or make sense of that?
Yeah. I mean, I think in a word, it's definitely been complicated. Just because I think maybe like the overarching theme that we've kind of been maybe like circling around is just the fact that, yeah, like it's difficult and it's also misunderstood. And the other thing that I think, Rachel, you mentioned is that everybody's experience is so varied. So I think that, yes, like
Yeah.
we can, look at our own experiences and try to apply that to others. But even that sometimes is, it's not going to line up just like in the same way, because, you could have two people that have depression, but their symptoms are different. The way that they react is different. And that all stems back to their temperament, their personality, all of that. So I think that it's been interesting just because it's kind of like having to go around and explain yourself to people and reintroduce a new side of you that even for me, like I don't even know if I know fully, or I don't even know if I even like her. I think I read that somewhere where it's just like, this is a not, and this is not to say it, because this could go, I think maybe, it could be misinterpreted that it's like, I think I have a split personality. No, no, it's like, I don't think that. I very much am still in the same body and it's the same person, but certainly it's, for me, I kind of had this idea of myself where it's like, I wanted to accomplish all these things and I have this, I have a certain ability to do this. I have the certain brains to get to whatever it might be. So we have all of these dreams and desires and maybe like a plan A that we think that we're going to do. And then, of course, as time goes on, different experiences happen. We encounter different things and we change. So our hearts change, our minds change, and then even our abilities change based on the circumstances. So suddenly it's kind of like there's this new person that has shown up and they're trying to dominate or overshadow all of these things that I had in mind for myself. And it's kind of this idea of adaptability and just being able to readapt, yourself and trying to bring this person up to speed with you. And really, I think trying to get to know, okay, like if this is the symptoms that I have, if this is the way that I experience certain things, or if this is even the way that certain things may impact or trigger me, like how can I adapt my surroundings? So that also would require me to go around and kind of introduce this person. So to kind of get back to that image. And it's certainly been interesting because I think there's like this added layer of, on top of it being faith and then people not understanding. I think culturally speaking as well, in Asian culture, and I think maybe in other cultures as well, like this has been a very difficult thing to really grapple with, just because it's not that like some cultures don't have mental illness. Like I think that across the board, everybody deals with this, no matter who you are, no matter what race or religion, whatever it might be. But I think it's the way that we approach and understand it, and maybe the credibility that we even give to its existence. So for me, it's been interesting to kind of navigate this in the context of, my family life with my parents, and, to navigate that with my extended family. And then further, like when I meet new people, like, how soon do I say that, oh, like I might flake on like an event or an appointment, not because I want to, or not because it's like, oh, something better has come up, but it's just that my symptoms have kind of acted up in a way that will make me a less enjoyable person to spend time with, or I really just don't feel like it. And it's, it's really like no fault of anyone's. It's just kind of, that's how things have happened. So that's been interesting, I would say. It's kind of interesting, difficult. Like those are the words that are kind of circulating in my
Yeah.
mind.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been like that, I would say.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like cultural thing, like we don't even think about that in a way when we, because but yeah, there's not barriers, but specific challenges in different people's lives based on maybe culture or even family, like your specific family, right? Like some families just might not have like a very specific way of like, well, you're feeling down and then this is how you deal with it, or and even how those can create images in our own minds. Like we have like that voice that we've grown up with that's come from our culture or family that we also have to battle because we discredit sometimes in our own hearts and our own minds our experience because we don't think it's I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but yeah, I didn't
Totally.
think of that.
Yeah. Like there were definitely times I think growing up, just off of that point, where whenever I was either not feeling up to it or feeling great, or even in moments where I thought I was feeling like at the top of my game, but let's just say I got a test back and like I didn't do so well, then it's like it's that returning of like the quote unquote perfect Rachel, where it's just like, why? Why do you suck? Like, why didn't you do well on this test? Or then like if I am like having horrible symptoms, like I just don't want to get out of bed. It's like, you were able to do this yesterday. Why can't you do this today? So it's like, it's those narratives that we tell ourselves that we always have to be 100% all the time. But for even someone with like without mental illness, we will never be 100% all the time. It's like varying things. It could happen, like later on in the day, just, someone cuts you off in traffic and that just like derails the rest of your day. Or it can happen right when you wake up, right? Like you step off your bed, and this has happened to me before, but like you just roll your ankle. Dumb, but it will derail the rest of your day. So, regardless of who we are, I think that, like, as you're saying, there are these narratives that we tell ourselves that we have to be 100% all the time, that we have to be happy or joyful all the time. But the reality is that that's not always the case, and rarely is it ever the case.
Right.
Maybe I can ask you just before we kind of head into God Wings, like this last question of what that looks like for you, like in those, because you talk a lot about like self-knowledge and kind of coming to know yourself more, right? And how you respond to things and deal with things and stuff like that. So what has that kind of felt like for you? How have you kind of seen the Lord in that, or not seen the Lord in that, or been challenged in that? And what does that kind of perseverance look like for you now?
And can I piggyback onto that question too? Of just like basically the same thing, but like what has been helpful? What has been helpful in like both like, I don't know, medical, physical things, spiritual things, interact, human things, just anything. What helps you?
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful, just because, like I said, I'm kind of at the tail end of my intro there. Like it's, it hasn't been a perfect journey ever since like my time of conversion. But I think the biggest thing has been recognizing whose I am and who I am in light of that. So really, like, and I think that God like speaks so perfectly in that way, where identity there's always been this wound of identity in my heart, like just who am I and what am I good at? And God, I think over time, especially through that moment of conversion, and ever since then, has been showing me what that means. So I think that He has shown that to me through the relationships that I have, like some of the friends that I have, and even some of the medical professionals that I've come in contact with. And, I would say too to any listeners that, are really considering going into like counseling or therapy of any sort. And also recognizing too that it's financially, it can be a burden sometimes, but I would recommend, still like seeking someone that you trust, and having, that relationship built with someone, and, journeying with that person. And then if it is possible, to go and seek out a counselor or a therapist, whoever it might be, just because I think it's so important to have an objective, like third person that can really call out in yourself, like times where maybe I'm telling myself like a false narrative of who I am, or, when I'm really like kind of allowing the devil to speak lies into who I am. So like having that objective third person, I think, is so important, just to be able to call those things out. And I think the last thing that I might say And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation now. But like this book that I've finished reading, and I cannot like stop recommending it. I literally, every time I get on a call, I'm always recommending it. But it's called The God Who Won't Let Go by Father Peter Van Bremen. And essentially, like the TLDR is that this book is about, you know, God and his love for us in so many different facets of our identity. But I think that, you know, like I said, growing up, we have this nebulous idea of, yeah, like God loves us. So what does that actually mean? And I think that as I've come into deeper relationship with him, like really understanding different facets of my identity and even these difficult parts, like the suffering, this mental illness, I really used to ask God, like, why did you give me this cross in particular? Or why did you even give me this thing at all? And I think that this might sound weird, but go with me on this. It's like really coming into making friends with that. And again, like kind of making friends with this maybe new adapted version of me that has all these sufferings, these symptoms, and how she goes about her life, how he goes about their life, if you're listening to this and you're a guy. But, you know, really understanding who you are, like all of these quirks and difficult moments, these crosses, and really getting to know them, I would say, and really, you know, even offering them back to God and just being like, okay, God, how do you see this in me? Like, how do you see me with this cross? And really meditating on that. I think it's been really helpful to do so. And it's a very like personal journey that you can take. And like I said, it's something that we spend the rest of our lives doing. So, yeah.
Wow.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. It's like, I think this is resonating a lot with me, what you're saying of this journey of acceptance, basically, of who I actually am in all of my weakness and all of my stuff, and in my circumstances and in my surroundings, and not who I want to be and who I feel like should be or who I expected to be or all of these things, but being like, okay, well, this is who I am and I'm loved. This is reality, and God loves me in this reality. So what is God going to do with that? You know? Because that's reality, and that's where God can work. So I think that's really beautiful, and
It reminds me
like
of
the lifetime journey.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, I cut you off. It reminds me of like of the paralytic in the scriptures, you know, who was lowered down through the roof by his friends. I mean, if you think about him in his life before that, like, I mean, he's a paralytic. Like people are caring for him. People are, I mean, but what came of his life? The Lord showing his power and how he can restore things. And not even did he make him walk, but I think sometimes we forget that, okay, if he's paralytic, then all of his muscles would have been totally atrophied and not strong enough even to support his own weight. So not only did the Lord give him the ability to stand upright, but he totally restored every muscle and joint and sinew and everything that is part of his body, so that through that, I mean, his glory would be revealed, you know, his ability to transform things. But I mean, how would he have known that when he's like, you know, like laying on a mat the week before, right?
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, Erin, when you're saying that, also, I'm quarantining or locking down or whatever with my parents in Halton, and Halton didn't have we were in the red zone, I guess, right before the lockdown. So we still had masses. So I was able to go on Christmas Day. So I was able to go Christmas Eve, midnight mass, actually, at my uncle's a priest, so at his parish, which is also in Halton. So we went, and I remember he said in his homily, you know, he was talking about the pandemic and, like, you know, acknowledging all of the cross that this is, that we're all living through right now, but also like reminding us, like, the greatest sort of disease is sin. Like, sin really is the you know, and what is sin really? It's separation. It's separating ourselves from the love of God. And so in some ways, it's so beautiful to me to hear what you're saying, because part of the restoration and the renewal of who we are, and recognizing we are in our brokenness and our sin, is just to allow the remedy to that disease deeper into ourselves, really, which is God's love, you know. And I remember, like, for me, even like maybe 10 years ago, I realized, like, the biggest struggle of my life really is knowing that God loves me. Like, I know it in here, but the difference from your head to your heart is just like it's just the greatest longest journey ever.
Yeah,
And it
right.
and
Like,
it just
put up your hand if that's you too. You know?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
it just takes its time, trickling down from your head to your heart. And I think so. I'm just hearing what you're saying, Rachel, and it's just like more of that. Like that's what God is doing in your life. That's what He's doing in all of our lives. Is just reminding us, like reinforcing that remedy. Like I love you. It's real. It's reality. Like Nicole said.
And even again, I'm just thinking about it, an Abiding Together podcast episode that I listened to recently where Sister Miriam was talking about this book that she was reading. I can't remember the name of the book nor the person who wrote it, but in there was this idea of that the Lord will give us each a cross that we have to carry for our life, that He will not take away, like St. Paul, right? Like he carried this thorn in his flesh for the whole of his life. And it's not out of malice or anything like that, but really so that can be an opportunity to be dependent on Him, like not that He's not a God of healing or a God of love or anything like that, but that
We're in a fallen world. There's just going to be crosses.
There's going to be crosses,
Yeah.
But that there's still redemption even in even that we can experience within that cross.
Right.
Absolutely.
You so much, man. So good to hear. To hear you start. Like this is the most that I've kind of heard about it in one fell swoop all at the same time, which is so. Thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably.
Yeah.
My pleasure. And like I said, I really do believe that it's God who kind of just set it up in this way, just to land it on a day that is still quite meaningful, even like a couple years out. So thank all of you.
Beautiful.
Like this is wonderful.
Beautiful. All right. Well, with that, why don't we head into some God winks? So I'm gonna turn it over to Nicole to start this week.
Sure. So my God wink was I had a group project paper manuscript that's some of my colleagues and I are trying to finish up, and it's due December 30th. And our aim was to have it done by like December 15th, so well in advance of the holidays. And that just didn't quite happen. And so I was realizing this, and I'm tired. I'm kind of like, when you feel like your body's approaching that burnout phase and you just need a break, And that's what I've been feeling like the last few days. And I was just, when I realized like, oh, this isn't going to be done. Like I'm going to have a few days off for Christmas and then I'm going to have to be right back into writing. It was just weighing on me, And so anyway, so I prayed and I was like, okay, well, God, you know the rest that I need. And I really thought that I needed this week off, but I'm not going to have it. So give me the rest that I need, even if I don't get the rest that I want. And then it was neat because I think the next morning or later that day or something, I was talking to my younger sister who's a nursing student, and her exams, because of COVID and a bunch of stuff that happened, have all been pushed to the beginning of January. So she was supposed to have them done and be done studying, but she needs to study. And so she was telling me how she's like, oh, I'm going to have to study after Christmas. And all of a sudden realizing both of us that, oh, we both have stuff to do. And so now we can like do our schoolwork together. And and for me, the burden of, oh, I have this work to do or whatever, it just left, because now it's like, I'm doing this now with someone else. And so I just felt so like, it was such an unexpected, I was like, in my mind, I'm like, Lord, you're not giving me the rest that I need, and I don't know how you're going to solve this situation. It's impossible, like typical me, right? I know you figured a lot of things out, but this one, Lord, but it's like always there's a grace in that. So anyway, so it's great. So I know that I have work to do this week, and I don't feel stressed about it, which is amazing.
That's awesome. I would just like to say that I love that you call your fellow students colleagues. It's so adult. Like you're going to get bills in the mail and you're going to complain about kids on the lawn. No, it's so good.
Yeah.
You can tell you're a grad student,
I guess
like
so.
to make that transition. Yeah. It's so
my
good.
colleagues at the lab. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I love it. All right, Rachel de Souza, how about you?
So, okay. So I feel like this has been all of us this year, but I've gotten lots of Christmas cards and like newsletters and things like that in the mail. And this year it's just been, I think because you just haven't had a chance to see a lot of people, it's just been such a great joy. So, so all through the season, whatever cards I've gotten and letters and stuff, I'm really bad at this. So I have sent no cards out, to be honest. Like, to be full disclosure, I'm the worst at this. So, but just everybody who has that gift and that that generous sort of generosity of spirit to do that. I'm so grateful because that's brought me a lot of joy. And one of my very good friends actually sent me a very unexpected little gift in the mail, which was this little Christmas gnome to match one that she has. And it's like filled with beans and it like sits anywhere in your house. And it's got little red gloves that covers his eyes. So I named him Bashful because he just looks like
That's so cute.
And I got him on a day where I had just something very challenging to do that I was just struggling with. Well, I guess we should say like this is coming out in the new year, but we're recording this at Christmas time. And it just was like, you know, I mean, I called her a thinker and everything, but it just was like, so I felt loved by the Lord in a very specific way in that moment and just like encouraged by him. And it was just something very lighthearted to remind me of God's presence sort of with me through sort of facing some of the challenges that I had to face that week. So yeah, just, I guess that just encouragement,
Cool.
a little bit
That's
of encouragement from friends.
Sweet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
that.
Nice. How about you, Rachel Wong?
Oh, so again, full disclosure, I was telling the ladies just before we got started that I've been thinking about this for so long. So I guess what I will say is, again, full disclosure, this is not a recent one, but I think one that's quite apt for just the topic that we've been talking about, that I come back to quite often just because it's one of those moments where I'm like, God, wow, you are real. Like legitimately, you are real. And this is wild. But a couple of years ago, I was helping to lead a retreat and we were doing prayovers with students. And, you know, I think that it's not that I don't trust him to come through, but I remember at that moment feeling kind of like a fraud that I was like, oh, like, you know, I'm praying over these students, but right now I feel like I'm in such a desolate place. So like, Lord, I want you to show me that you are real in this moment. So, you know, there was a girl that came up and we were gonna pray over her, and she's one of those people that, you know, maybe you've encountered people that you just can't read. Like sometimes you'll crack a joke and you think it's the hilarious thing in the world, but they're just like, I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
great, okay, be here all night.
Right.
But we're praying, and I asked her, I was like, okay, is there anything in particular that you would like prayers for? And, you know, true to her nature, she's like, no. I'm like, all right,
Love that.
okay,
Great.
Spirit, you're gonna have to come through. So we start praying, and the one of my favorite verses is from 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. It's like, I fought the good fight, I finished the race, I've kept the faith. So as we're praying, I felt, I was like, Lord, like I'm desperate, like, you know, please come through. And that verse came to mind. So I opened the Bible and I set it out to her. I prayed it over her. And there's something that was kind of poking me inside to read further. And truth be told, I had never read beyond that. I was like, this is a lovely verse. Don't need anything else. But I felt compelled to read more. So, and I'm sorry, I'm going to totally like paraphrase this, but essentially it's, you know, it's that verse. And then it talks about, you know, like God giving us a crown of righteousness for going through our lives. So again, like I would encourage you to go through, it's verse 8. So it's chapter 4, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 to 8 that I read. And it was that crown of righteousness part that, you know, really got her all of a sudden. So this was probably the most emotion that I'd ever seen from her ever. And I was like, okay, something's happening. I'm not sure what's going on. And then afterwards, you know, like we conclude the prayer and she, you know, she gets up and walks away quietly. So I couldn't even ask her like what had happened. The day after, because this was the evening, so the morning after, she comes up to me and she was just like, I have been suffering for years with like this particular mental illness. And the other day I asked God to give me a crown for my suffering because I'm just so tired of all of this suffering. Like I feel like I deserve a crown for this. And then you said that in the prayer and I was like, oh my God, that's the crown. I was like, God is real. Oh my gosh, God is real. So at that point, you know, just even I felt my desolation lift because it was like, oh my goodness, how could this be except for the Lord? So yeah, like I said, it's an old one, but I feel like it's quite apt for just the topic that we're talking about. So yeah, God is real.
Oldie but a goodie.
Oh yeah, got lots of shivers.
Oh, that's
beautiful.
awesome. I think mine from this week is actually from Christmas Day. because I've been kind of trying to figure out with this like fibromyalgia, how much I can do before I kind of like knock myself out. And it got to the point in the day, like Christmas Eve, I did a lot, and then I couldn't sleep, and I had like restless legs and like a restless back. I don't know if you've ever felt that,
yeah.
like where you have like restless legs and you ugh. Anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't fall asleep until like 4 a.m. And then my nephew, who is almost 5, was on the floor beside me. And so he's up at 7 and excited to vote presents. So I had like very little sleep. And then I was just like, it was not a good day. I was just really struggling. I was like, I have to go have a nap. So I went to have a nap, and then I woke up and I was like, I feel like I want a nap for like another hour. Like I'm not ready to be face to face with another human being yet. And then my mom opened the door, and my little nephew, who's just turned 1, he came in, smiled at me, and then laid down on the floor. She was like, maybe he wants to have a nap. So she put him on top of me, and then I sat in the rocking chair, and he fell asleep on me, and he never does that. He's like the type of kid who will fight his naps no matter what, you know? And yeah, he just like fell asleep on me, and it was just like the sense of like this gift from the Lord, like you like just rest, you know, like just rest. And it was such a beautiful, yeah, it was. And I mean, that's like the best rest, when you're like under a baby.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You know, it reminds me
about that. Yeah, it's so true.
It's so beautiful. And that's like a beautiful Christmas gift, because it's like you think of the Christ child, and like we hold the Christ child, but the little Christ child holds us in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that Christmas
skinning me
gift.
down because he's heavy now. So I joked my sister, I'm like, with both her and my older nephew, I'm like, you know, when they fall asleep, because they immediately start sweating profusely. Like, it's like, it's so funny. Oh my gosh. Anyways, they wake up and the hair is like, okay.
That's great.
Good. Yeah. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining us
Rachel.
this week. Like, I know, I'm sure, because it's not an uncommon thing, dealing with mental illness, whether it's kind of, you know, something that people deal with for a lifetime or for various periods or things like that. So I think there'll be a lot of people who will listen and who will feel a lot less alone because of what you shared. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thanks. And everybody else, we'll see you here. You'll hear us. We won't hear you. You will hear us next week.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Thanks. God bless. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough, and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless, and see you next week.